More interesting videos are coming soon. Your choice is our goal. Comment what videos you want and subscribe quickly.
Long before modern cities, highways, and skyscrapers existed, the land along the Nile River was home to one of the most fascinating civilizations in human history. Thousands of years ago, the people of ancient Egypt built monuments so massive and so precise that even today they leave engineers and historians amazed. Among these wonders, none are more famous than the pyramids. When most people hear the word pyramid, they imagine the enormous stone mountains rising from the desert at Giza. These structures have stood for more than 4,000 years. Windstorms, wars, and the passing of time have tried to wear them down, but they still stand strong against the horizon. But one question has always fascinated people. How did the ancient Egyptians actually build them? To understand that story, we need to travel back in time to a world very different from our own. Ancient Egypt was built around the Nile River. Every year, the river flooded its banks, leaving behind rich soil that allowed crops to grow. This fertile land made Egypt one of the earliest places where large populations could live and work together. The Egyptian people believed deeply in the afterlife. To them, death was not the end. It was simply the beginning of another journey. Because of this belief, their rulers, known as pharaohs, prepared for their lives after death while they were still alive. Pharaohs were not just kings. Egyptians believed they were living gods on earth, chosen by the gods to maintain balance in the universe. When a pharaoh died, it was believed his spirit would travel to the afterlife and join the gods. But for that journey to succeed, the pharaoh's body had to be protected and preserved. His possessions, treasures, and symbols of power also needed to accompany him. This belief is what led to the construction of massive tombs. Before pyramids existed, early Egyptian rulers were buried in simpler structures called mastabas. These were rectangular tombs built from mud bricks, with flat roofs and sloping sides. They were not very tall, but they were carefully designed to protect the burial chamber beneath the ground. Over time, Egyptian architects began experimenting with larger and more impressive structures. One of the most important figures in this story was a brilliant architect and engineer named Imhotep. Imhotep served the pharaoh Djoser during Egypt's third dynasty, around 2667 BCE. Instead of building a traditional mastaba, Imhotep had a bold idea. He decided to stack several mastabas on top of each other, each one smaller than the one below it. The result was the step pyramid of Saqqara, the first pyramid in human history. When it was completed, the step pyramid stood about 200 feet tall. For the people of that time, it must have looked unbelievable. Nothing like it had ever been built before. It was the tallest man-made structure on Earth. But the step pyramid was just the beginning. Egyptian engineers soon experimented with smoother designs. They wanted pyramids with straight, smooth sides rather than steps. These new designs required careful planning, mathematical skill, and enormous manpower. During the reign of Pharaoh Sneferu, several experiments were attempted. One of these pyramids, known today as the Bent Pyramid, shows how challenging the process was. Partway through construction, the builders changed the angle of the sides, creating a noticeable bend in the structure. Even mistakes became valuable lessons. Eventually, Egyptian engineers perfected the design of the true pyramid. These pyramids had smooth triangular sides that met perfectly at a single point at the top. The most famous examples would later be built at Giza. But constructing something so enormous required more than just imagination. It required organization on a scale the world had rarely seen. First, the location had to be chosen carefully. The ground needed to be solid enough to support millions of tons of stone. The site also needed to be close enough to the Nile River so that materials could be transported easily. Once the land was selected, workers began preparing the land. The ground had to be leveled with incredible precision. Archaeologists believe Egyptian engineers used simple but clever tools, like water channels, to make sure the surface was perfectly flat. After the ground was prepared, the real work began. Stone blocks were cut from quarries using copper tools and stone hammers. Limestone was the most common material used for pyramid construction. The outer casing stones, which made the pyramids shine brightly in the sunlight, were made from fine white limestone. Some of the most important internal chambers were built using granite, a much harder stone that came from quarries hundreds of miles away in southern Egypt. Transporting these stones was a massive challenge. Workers loaded the blocks onto wooden sleds and dragged them across the ground. Evidence from ancient drawings shows that teams of workers poured water on the sand in front of the sleds. This simple trick reduced friction and made the heavy loads easier to move. Large teams of laborers worked together in organized groups. Contrary to old myths, the pyramid builders were not slaves. Archaeological discoveries show that many of them were skilled workers who were well-fed and lived in organized communities near the construction sites. These groups included stonecutters, engineers, surveyors, and laborers. Each group had specific jobs that helped the project move forward. Food was brought in huge quantities to support the workforce. Bread, fish, onions, and beer were common meals for the laborers. Keeping the workers healthy and motivated was essential for such a massive project. The pyramids were not built overnight. Even the most famous pyramid, the Great Pyramid of Giza, likely took around 20 years to complete. Day after day, year after year, thousands of workers continued placing stone blocks one on top of another. But one biggest mystery remains. How were the stones lifted so high? Historians believe Egyptians used large ramps made from mud bricks and limestone chips. These ramps allowed workers to drag the stone blocks up the sides of the growing pyramid. As the pyramid rose higher, the ramps were extended or rebuilt to reach the new levels. Slowly, layer by layer, the pyramid began to take shape. From a distance, the construction site must have looked like a giant city of workers, ramps, sleds, and stone blocks, all moving together in an organized rhythm. The project required careful leadership and planning. Overseers kept track of progress, while scribes recorded supplies and labor. Every block placed into the pyramid was part of a grand design meant to last forever. For the ancient Egyptians, these monuments were not simply buildings. They were symbols of divine power, eternal life, and the strength of their civilization. And this was only the beginning of the Pyramid Age. The greatest pyramids had not yet been built. The most famous pharaohs had not yet begun their projects, and the world had not yet seen the most incredible engineering achievement of ancient Egypt.
As the idea of pyramid building spread across ancient Egypt, something extraordinary began to happen. What had started as an experiment with stacked stone structures slowly evolved into one of the greatest architectural traditions in human history. Egyptian builders were learning with every project. Each new pyramid became a test of engineering skill, organization, and imagination. After the success of the step pyramid at Saqqara, the rulers of Egypt wanted something even more impressive. Pharaohs believed their monuments should reflect their power and their connection to the gods. A larger, smoother pyramid would not only serve as a tomb, but also stand as a symbol of divine authority for thousands of years. One of the most ambitious pharaohs in this era was Sneferu. He ruled during Egypt's 4th dynasty and is remembered as one of the greatest pyramid builders in history. Sneferu was determined to perfect the design of the true pyramid. His first attempt was the pyramid at Midim. At first glance today, the structure looks unusual, almost like a tower rising from the desert. This is because much of the outer casing collapsed long ago. Originally, however, the pyramid was designed with smooth sides. It represented one of the earliest attempts to transform the stepped design into a true geometric pyramid. The Midim pyramid taught Egyptian builders important lessons about weight distribution and structural stability. Massive stone structures required precise angles and careful planning. If the angle of the sides was too steep, the pyramid could become unstable. Despite these challenges, Sneferu continued his experiments. His next project became one of the most famous pyramids in Egypt today, the Bent Pyramid at Dashur. At the beginning of construction, workers built the pyramid with steep sides. But as the structure rose higher, engineers realized the angle was too dangerous. To prevent collapse, they changed the slope of the upper section. The result was a pyramid that suddenly shifts angle partway up, creating its distinctive bent appearance. Although it was not perfect, the bent pyramid proved something very important. Egyptian engineers now understood how critical the pyramid's angle was for stability. Learning from this experience, Sneferu launched another massive project nearby. This time, the builders used a shallower angle from the beginning. The result was the Red Pyramid, named after the reddish limestone used in its construction. The Red Pyramid is considered the first successful true pyramid in history. Its sides rise smoothly from the base to the peak without the stepped layers seen in earlier designs. For the first time, Egyptian builders had fully mastered the geometry of pyramid construction. Standing over 340 feet tall, the Red Pyramid must have looked astonishing to the people who saw it for the first time. It showed that Egypt now possessed the knowledge and the workforce needed to create truly monumental structures. These experiments paved the way for the greatest pyramid project of all. Sneferu's son, Khufu, inherited not only the throne, but also the ambition to build something even more extraordinary. Khufu wanted a tomb that would surpass anything the world had ever seen. He chose a plateau near the Nile River called Giza as the location for his pyramid. The site was perfect. It sat on solid bedrock, high above the surrounding land, and it was close enough to the river to allow materials to be transported easily. Before construction could begin, surveyors had to carefully map the area. Egyptian engineers were remarkably skilled at measuring land and aligning structures. The base of Khufu's pyramid was aligned almost perfectly with the four cardinal directions: north, south, east, and west. Even today, modern instruments show that the pyramid's alignment is incredibly precise. Once the site was prepared, workers began cutting enormous limestone blocks from nearby quarries. These blocks would form the core of the pyramid. Each stone weighed several tons. Meanwhile, the finest white limestone was brought from quarries across the Nile River. These smooth stones would form the outer casing of the pyramid, giving it a brilliant white surface that reflected sunlight across the desert. For the internal chambers, the builders used granite blocks transported from the region of Aswan, hundreds of miles to the south. Moving these massive stones required incredible coordination. The Nile River played a key role in transportation. During the annual flood season, boats could carry heavy materials much closer to the construction site. Canals and temporary waterways were sometimes dug to bring the boats even nearer to the pyramid plateau. From there, workers unloaded the stones and dragged them across prepared paths using sleds. The workforce needed for such a project was enormous. Thousands of laborers, craftsmen, and specialists participated in the construction. But they were not chaotic crowds. The entire operation was organized like a well-run city. Workers were divided into teams. Each team had its own name and responsibilities. Archaeologists have even discovered graffiti left by workers that show the names of these teams, sometimes with humorous or proud titles. Nearby, a large workers' village was built to house the labor force. Excavations have revealed bakeries, storage rooms, sleeping quarters, and even medical facilities.
This village shows that the pyramid builders were well supported. They received regular food supplies, including bread, meat, fish, and beer. Medical care was available for injuries, and skilled craftsmen were respected members of the community. The construction site itself must have been filled with activity every day. Stonecutters shaped blocks in the quarries, transport teams moved the stones toward the pyramid, engineers and overseers supervised the placement of each layer. As the pyramid rose higher, the ramp systems became increasingly complex. Some historians believe straight ramps were used at first, while others think spiral ramps may have wrapped around the structure as it grew. Regardless of the exact design, the ramps allowed workers to pull the massive blocks upward one level at a time. Each new layer brought the pyramid closer to completion. The precision of this work was extraordinary. The stones were cut so carefully that many of them fit together with almost no gaps. Even after thousands of years, it is difficult to slide a thin blade between some of the blocks. Inside the pyramid, workers constructed passageways and chambers designed to protect the pharaoh's burial site. These internal spaces required advanced planning because once the pyramid was finished, reaching them would be impossible. Deep within the structure, the king's chamber was built using enormous granite blocks. Above this chamber, engineers placed several relieving chambers designed to distribute the weight of the pyramid and prevent the ceiling from collapsing. This level of planning shows that Egyptian builders understood structural engineering far better than many people once believed. For years, construction continued under the hot Egyptian sun. Workers added layer after layer of stone, slowly shaping the most famous pyramid in history. But the Great Pyramid was not only a tomb, it was also a symbol. From miles away, travelers approaching Egypt would see it rising above the desert like a man-made mountain. It told the world that Egypt possessed incredible power, organization, and knowledge. Yet, even as Khufu's pyramid neared completion, new questions were already emerging. How did the Egyptians manage such perfect measurements without modern tools? What mathematical knowledge guided their designs? And how did the final shining pyramid look when it was newly completed? Those answers appear in the next part of the story.
As the enormous pyramid of Pharaoh Khufu continued rising above the Giza plateau, the project began to reveal something remarkable about ancient Egyptian civilization. Building such a monument was not only about strength and labor, it required knowledge, planning, and an understanding of mathematics and astronomy that many people today do not expect from a civilization that lived more than 4,000 years ago. For the pyramid to succeed, every measurement had to be precise. If the base was uneven or the sides were misaligned, the entire structure could become unstable. The Egyptian engineers understood this clearly, and they developed clever methods to achieve incredible accuracy. The first challenge was preparing the foundation. The Giza Plateau provided a solid base of limestone bedrock, but it was not naturally flat. Workers had to level the ground before construction could begin. Archaeologists believe the Egyptians used a surprisingly simple but effective technique. They dug shallow trenches across the construction area and filled them with water. Because water naturally finds a level surface, this allowed engineers to see which parts of the ground were higher or lower. Workers then cut away the high spots and filled the low ones until the entire surface was almost perfectly level. Modern measurements show that the base of the Great Pyramid is nearly perfectly flat, with differences of only a few centimeters across hundreds of feet. Achieving this level of accuracy without modern equipment is truly impressive. After preparing the foundation, the next step was aligning the pyramid with the cardinal directions. The sides of the pyramid had to face north, south, east, and west as precisely as possible. The Egyptians looked to the sky for guidance. At night, ancient astronomers studied the movement of stars. By observing certain stars as they crossed the sky, they could determine true north. Using simple sighting tools and careful observation, they marked out the orientation of the pyramid's base. The result was extraordinary. The Great Pyramid is aligned to true north with incredible precision, more accurate than many later historical structures. Once the orientation was established, surveyors marked out the pyramid's square base. Each side measured about 755 feet. The corners had to form perfect right angles so that the pyramid would rise evenly toward its peak. To accomplish this, Egyptian builders used ropes with knots tied at regular intervals. These ropes acted as measuring tools. Teams of surveyors stretched them across the ground to mark straight lines and right angles. From these simple tools came one of the most precise structures ever built in the ancient world. As construction continued, workers added layer after layer of limestone blocks. The pyramid slowly grew taller, but its shape had to remain perfectly symmetrical. Engineers constantly checked measurements to ensure that the four sides remained even. If one side rose faster than the others, the pyramid could become uneven. The builders also had to maintain the correct slope of the pyramid's sides. The Great Pyramid's angle is about 51.5 degrees. This angle was carefully chosen because it provided the best balance between height and structural stability. Too steep, and the pyramid could collapse. Too shallow, it would not reach the desired height. Maintaining this precise slope required constant attention. Workers used plumb lines, simple tools made from a string and a small weight, to ensure that stones were positioned correctly. These tools helped them maintain vertical alignment as the pyramid grew higher. Inside the pyramid, construction followed a carefully planned design. Long corridors and chambers had to be built while the pyramid was still rising. One of the most important features was the Grand Gallery. This tall, sloping corridor leads toward the king's chamber deep inside the structure. Its walls rise in a stepped design that helps distribute weight and support the ceiling. The Grand Gallery is one of the most impressive architectural features inside the pyramid. Even today, visitors are amazed by its height and precision. The king's chamber itself was built using massive granite blocks. Granite is much harder than limestone, which made it more difficult to cut and transport. But it was also stronger, making it perfect for protecting the burial chamber. Above the king's chamber, engineers constructed several layers of granite blocks arranged to create relieving chambers. These chambers helped redirect the immense weight of the pyramid away from the chamber below. Without this design, the ceiling might have collapsed under the enormous pressure of the stone above. Another fascinating feature inside the pyramid is the narrow shafts that extend from the king's chamber toward the outer surface of the pyramid. For many years, people believed these shafts were ventilation passages. However, some historians believe they had a symbolic purpose. The shafts may have been aligned with certain stars, allowing the pharaoh's spirit to travel toward the heavens after death. This idea fits with the Egyptian belief that the pharaoh would join the gods among the stars. While engineers worked on the pyramid itself, life continued in the busy workers' village nearby. Archaeological excavations have uncovered the remains of bakeries capable of producing thousands of loaves of bread each day. Large kitchens prepared meals for the labor force. Storage rooms held grain, dried fish, and other supplies. Workers lived in organized housing blocks. These were not temporary camps, but well-planned communities. Some workers were permanent craftsmen who spent years working on the pyramid project. Medical care was available for injuries, which were common in such demanding work. Archaeologists have discovered skeletons showing signs of healed broken bones, suggesting that injured workers were treated and allowed time to recover.
This evidence challenges the old myth that pyramids were built by slave labor. Instead, many of the workers appeared to have been respected members of Egyptian society. Some may have been farmers who worked on the pyramids during the Nile flood season when their fields were underwater. Others were highly skilled specialists whose expertise was essential for the project. The construction site must have been a place of constant activity. Teams hauled stones up ramps. Craftsmen shaped blocks with copper chisels and stone tools. Overseers supervised the work and recorded progress. Day after day, the pyramid slowly grew higher. As the structure approached its final height of about 482 feet, the ramps had to be extended even further. Moving stones to such heights required careful coordination and strength, but the Egyptians were determined to complete the monument. Finally, after decades of work, the pyramid reached its peak. The final stage of construction involved placing the smooth outer casing stones. These polished white limestone blocks were fitted carefully along the pyramid's sides, creating a brilliant surface that reflected sunlight. When the pyramid was newly completed, it did not look like the rough stone structure we see today. Instead, it shone brightly in the desert sun, almost like a giant mirror visible from miles away. At the very top, a special capstone known as a pyramidion was placed. This stone may have been covered in gold or electrum, allowing it to sparkle in the sunlight. The completed pyramid must have been an incredible sight. But the story of pyramid building did not end with Khufu. His successors had their own ambitions and plans. Nearby, new pyramids would soon rise on the Giza Plateau, and with them would come new challenges, new innovations, and new mysteries. That story continues in the next part.
When the Great Pyramid of Khufu was finally completed, it stood as the tallest structure on Earth. Rising more than 480 feet above the desert floor, it dominated the Giza Plateau like a man-made mountain. For the people of ancient Egypt, this was not just a building, it was a symbol of divine authority and eternal life. But the story of pyramid building did not end with Khufu. After his death, the throne passed to his son, Pharaoh Khafre. Growing up in the shadow of the Great Pyramid, Khafre understood the importance of continuing his father's legacy. The pyramids were not simply tombs, they were powerful statements about the strength and stability of the Egyptian kingdom. Khafre decided to build his own pyramid near his father's monument on the Giza Plateau. Although his pyramid is slightly smaller than Khufu's, it appears taller today because it sits on higher ground. From a distance, Khafre's pyramid creates a dramatic view on the horizon. Even now, visitors sometimes mistake it for the Great Pyramid because it still has some of its original outer casing stones near the top. When the pyramids were first completed, all of them were covered with smooth white limestone. The surfaces were polished so carefully that sunlight reflected brilliantly off the sides. From miles away, the pyramids would have appeared almost glowing against the desert sky. Khafre's pyramid complex was more than just the pyramid itself. Like Khufu's monument, it included temples, courtyards, causeways, and smaller structures designed for religious ceremonies. One of the most fascinating features connected to Khafre's complex is the enormous stone statue that guards the plateau, the Great Sphinx. The Sphinx is carved directly from a massive limestone outcrop in the bedrock. It has the body of a lion and the head of a human, which many historians believe represents Pharaoh Khafre himself. The statue stretches about 240 feet in length and rises more than 60 feet high. For thousands of years, the Sphinx has watched over the pyramids, facing east toward the rising sun. In ancient Egyptian belief, the lion symbolized strength and protection. By combining the lion's body with the head of the pharaoh, the statue represented royal power and divine guardianship.
The construction of the Sphinx required incredible skill. Instead of moving stone blocks, workers carefully carved the statue directly from the rock of the plateau. Large sections were shaped first, followed by finer details that gave the face and body their form. Over time, wind and sand have eroded parts of the statue, but it still remains one of the most recognizable monuments in the world. Meanwhile, work continued across the Giza Plateau. The third major pyramid at the site was built by Pharaoh Menkaure, Khafre's successor. His pyramid is noticeably smaller than the other two, standing about 213 feet tall. Despite its smaller size, Menkaure's pyramid shows signs of careful craftsmanship. The lower sections were built using heavy blocks of granite, which were transported from quarries far to the south. Granite is much harder than limestone, making it extremely durable, but also more difficult to shape. Around Menkaure's pyramid, several smaller pyramids were also constructed. These are often called Queen's Pyramids because they were likely built for royal family members. Together, the three main pyramids and their surrounding structures formed one of the most impressive architectural landscapes ever created in the ancient world. But building pyramids required more than just skilled workers and good engineering. It also required powerful leadership and a stable kingdom. The pharaoh controlled vast resources across Egypt. Farmers, craftsmen, quarry workers, and transport crews all contributed to these massive projects. During the annual flooding of the Nile, when farming work slowed down, many laborers joined the pyramid workforce. This system allowed the kingdom to organize huge numbers of workers without disrupting the country's food production. Each group of workers had its own role. Stonecutters worked in the quarries, carefully shaping blocks from the rock. Transport teams hauled the stones across land or loaded them onto boats along the Nile. Engineers and architects supervised the construction process and solved problems that arose along the way. At the top of this system were royal officials who reported directly to the pharaoh. They managed supplies, tracked labor schedules, and ensured that construction stayed on schedule. Archaeologists have discovered ancient records showing how organized these projects were. Workers were divided into rotating teams, sometimes called gangs. Each gang worked for a certain period before being replaced by another group. Some of the team names discovered in ancient graffiti show pride and humor. One group called themselves the Friends of Khufu, while another was known as the Drunkards of Menkaure. These small details remind us that the pyramids were built by real people with their own personalities, friendships, and daily routines. Life at the workers' village was busy but structured. Workers woke early and began their tasks before the heat of the day became too intense. Meals were distributed regularly, and supplies arrived constantly from across the kingdom. Bakeries produced thousands of loaves of bread each day. Large vats were used to brew beer, which was a common drink in ancient Egypt and safer than untreated water. Medical workers treated injuries, and craftsmen repaired tools. Copper chisels, stone hammers, and wooden sleds needed constant maintenance. Despite the hard work, many workers appeared to take pride in their contributions. Building a pyramid for the pharaoh was seen as a way to serve both the king and the gods. As decades passed, the Giza pyramids became the center of a vast religious landscape. Temples near the pyramids hosted ceremonies honoring the dead pharaohs. Priests performed rituals designed to maintain the spiritual power of the king in the afterlife. Offerings of food, incense, and prayers were presented regularly. For the ancient Egyptians, these monuments were not abandoned after construction. They remained active religious sites for generations. However, over time, the age of giant pyramids began to fade. Later pharaohs still built pyramids, but most were smaller and less ambitious than those at Giza. Economic changes, political challenges, and shifting religious practices gradually altered the way royal tombs were constructed. Yet the pyramids that already existed continued to stand as powerful reminders of Egypt's golden age. Even thousands of years later, travelers from distant lands came to see them. Ancient Greek historians wrote about the pyramids with amazement, trying to understand how such incredible structures had been built. But many mysteries still remained. Exactly how were the massive stones lifted into place at such high heights? What happened to the shining outer casing that once covered the pyramids? And why did pyramid construction eventually decline? Those answers appear in the next part of the story.
As the pyramids of Giza stood completed against the Egyptian sky, they represented the peak of an era. Never before had humans constructed monuments on such a massive scale. The projects required tens of thousands of workers, careful planning, and decades of continuous effort. Yet even with all this success, pyramid construction was not without its challenges. One of the greatest questions historians have studied is how the Egyptians lifted such enormous stone blocks to the upper levels of the pyramids. Some of these blocks weighed several tons. Raising them hundreds of feet into the air without modern cranes seems almost impossible. The most widely accepted explanation involves the use of ramps. At the early stages of construction, workers likely built a large, straight ramp leading up one side of the pyramid. This ramp was made from mud bricks, limestone chips, sand, and rubble. As the pyramid grew taller, the ramp was extended higher to reach the new levels. Teams of workers pulled the heavy stones upward using thick ropes. The stones were placed on wooden sleds, which slid along the ramp's surface. Sometimes workers poured water on the ramp to reduce friction, allowing the sleds to move more smoothly. This method required enormous strength and coordination. Large groups of workers pulled together, while overseers directed their movements. Step by step, the stone blocks were dragged upward toward their final position. However, straight ramps created a new problem. As the pyramid grew taller, the ramp had to become longer and larger. Eventually, the ramp itself would require nearly as much material as the pyramid. Because of this issue, some historians believe the Egyptians used different ramp designs during different stages of construction. One possibility is a zigzag ramp that climbed the pyramid's sides in sections. Another idea is a spiral ramp that wrapped around the outside of the pyramid as it grew higher. These designs would have required less building material while still allowing workers to transport stones upward. There is also a theory suggesting that internal ramps may have been used inside the pyramid itself. According to this idea, hidden corridors within the structure allowed workers to move stones upward from inside. While the exact method remains debated, most experts agree that ramps played an essential role in pyramid construction. Another fascinating mystery involves the smooth outer casing that once covered the pyramids. Today, the pyramids appear rough and stepped, with exposed limestone blocks forming their surfaces. But when they were first completed, the pyramids looked very different. Each pyramid was covered with polished white limestone casing stones. These stones were cut with incredible precision and fitted tightly together. Their smooth surfaces reflected sunlight brilliantly, making the pyramids shine across the desert landscape. Some ancient travelers even described them as glowing mountains of light. Over the centuries, however, most of these casing stones disappeared. Earthquakes loosened some of them, but many were deliberately removed by later builders. During the Middle Ages, stones from the pyramids were taken to build mosques, palaces, and other structures in nearby cities. As the outer casing was stripped away, the rough core blocks underneath became visible. This is why the pyramids look different today than they did in ancient times. Another missing element is the pyramidion, the special capstone placed at the very top of the pyramid. This stone was often covered with gold or a gold-like metal called electrum. When sunlight struck the pyramidion, it would shine brightly, symbolizing the connection between the pharaoh and the sun god.
Unfortunately, most pyramidions have been lost to history. Inside the pyramids, the burial chambers were carefully sealed after the pharaoh's funeral. The Egyptians used massive stone blocks to close off corridors and protect the royal tomb. Despite these efforts, many pyramids eventually were robbed by treasure hunters. The treasures buried with the pharaohs were incredibly valuable. Gold jewelry, statues, ceremonial objects, and precious stones were placed inside the tombs. Over time, robbers searched for ways to break into these hidden chambers. Some tombs were looted only a few generations after they were sealed. Because of this, archaeologists often find pyramids that appear empty today. The treasures that once filled them have long since vanished. Yet even without their treasures, the pyramids remain extraordinary monuments. Another important question historians ask is why the Egyptians eventually stopped building giant pyramids. During the time of the Fourth Dynasty, Egypt was wealthy, stable, and strongly unified under powerful pharaohs. This allowed the government to organize massive construction projects. But over time, conditions began to change. Later rulers faced economic challenges and political struggles. Maintaining the enormous workforce required for pyramid construction became more difficult. At the same time, tomb robbing became an increasing problem. As a result, pharaohs began choosing different burial methods. Instead of building huge pyramids visible from miles away, many later rulers chose hidden tombs carved into cliffs and mountains. These secret tombs were easier to guard and harder for robbers to find. This change eventually led to the famous burial site known as the Valley of the Kings, where many pharaohs of the New Kingdom were buried. Even though the era of giant pyramids ended, the structures already built remained powerful symbols of Egyptian civilization. Travelers from distant lands came to see them and wondered how such monuments had been created. Ancient historians wrote about the pyramids with fascination, sometimes exaggerating the stories they heard. Some claimed that hundreds of thousands of slaves built the pyramids. Others believed strange machines or lost technologies must have been involved. Modern archaeology has shown that the truth is both simpler and more impressive. The pyramids were built through organization, skilled labor, clever engineering, and the determination of an entire civilization. The builders used simple tools, but they used them with incredible precision. Even today, the pyramids challenge our understanding of what ancient societies were capable of achieving. But the story of pyramid building is not finished yet. Beyond the massive structures themselves lies another fascinating story, the story of the people who designed them, the workers who built them, and the daily life inside the great construction projects. What did a typical day look like for a pyramid builder? How were workers organized into teams? And what happened during the final burial ceremony inside the pyramid?
Start Part 6. Behind the towering pyramids and the grand monuments of ancient Egypt stood thousands of ordinary people whose daily work made these wonders possible. While the pyramids often seemed mysterious and almost magical, their construction was the result of careful organization and the efforts of a large and disciplined workforce. To understand how the pyramids were built, it is important to understand the lives of the workers themselves. Near the Giza Plateau, archaeologists have discovered the remains of a large settlement where many of the pyramid workers lived. This workers' village was not a temporary camp. It was a carefully planned community designed to support the enormous labor force needed for pyramid construction. The village included long rows of housing where workers slept and rested after long days of labor. There were bakeries that produced large quantities of bread every day, storage rooms filled with grain and supplies, and workshops where tools were made and repaired. The discovery of this settlement has helped historians understand that the pyramid builders were not slaves forced to work under brutal conditions, as many older stories suggested. Instead, many of the workers were skilled laborers who took pride in their work. Some workers were permanent craftsmen, including stone cutters, engineers, architects, carpenters, and metal workers.
Others were farmers who joined the workforce during the annual flooding of the Nile. Every year, the Nile River overflowed its banks and covered nearby farmland with water. During this time, farmers could not plant or harvest crops, so many of them traveled to construction sites and worked on government projects like pyramid building. This system allowed Egypt to maintain a large workforce without harming agricultural production. The workers were divided into organized teams, sometimes called labor gangs. Each gang had its own supervisors who reported to higher officials responsible for managing the entire project. Archaeologists have found markings and graffiti left by these teams on some pyramid stones. These markings reveal the names of different worker groups. Some had humorous or proud titles, showing the spirit and identity of the teams. Names such as the Friends of Khufu or the Strong Ones of the White Crown have been discovered on ancient blocks. These names suggest that workers felt a sense of loyalty to their teams and to the pharaoh they were serving. A typical day for a pyramid worker began early in the morning before the desert heat became too intense. Workers gathered in their teams and received instructions from overseers about the tasks for the day. Some workers traveled to nearby quarries where limestone blocks were cut from the rock. Using copper chisels, wooden wedges, and stone hammers, they carefully separated large blocks from the quarry walls. Once the blocks were cut, they were roughly shaped before being transported to the pyramid site. Other teams were responsible for moving the stones. They loaded the heavy blocks onto wooden sleds and dragged them along prepared paths toward the pyramid. This work required teamwork and rhythm, as dozens of workers pulled together using thick ropes. At certain points along the path, water was poured onto the sand to reduce friction and make the sleds easier to pull. Meanwhile, skilled stonemasons worked near the pyramid itself, carefully shaping each block so that it would fit perfectly with the surrounding stones. Their work required patience and accuracy, since even small mistakes could affect the stability of the entire structure. Engineers and surveyors constantly checked measurements to ensure that the pyramid remained perfectly aligned. As the pyramid grew higher, additional workers built and maintained the ramp systems used to transport stones upward. These ramps needed regular repairs and adjustments as construction progressed. Inside the pyramid, specialized teams worked on corridors, chambers, and passageways. These areas had to be carefully planned and constructed before the outer layers of the pyramid sealed them inside. Food distribution was another essential part of daily life at the construction site. Large kitchens prepared meals for thousands of workers every day. Bread was the most common food, often eaten with onions, garlic, or fish. Meat from cattle, sheep, and goats was also provided, especially for skilled workers and supervisors. Beer was an important part of the Egyptian diet and was consumed regularly. It provided energy and was safer to drink than untreated water. Archaeologists studying the workers' village have discovered animal bones, bread ovens, and large storage containers that reveal the scale of food production required for the workforce. Medical care was also available for workers who were injured during construction. Evidence of healed bones found in skeletons shows that injured workers often received treatment and time to recover before returning to work. This level of care suggests that workers were considered valuable members of the project rather than disposable labor. At the end of the workday, laborers returned to the village to rest. They shared meals, repaired tools, and prepared for the next day's tasks. Despite the hard labor, many workers likely felt proud of their contributions. Building a pyramid for the pharaoh was seen as an important service to the kingdom and to the gods. Years passed as the pyramid slowly rose higher and higher. Stone by stone, the monument took shape. The structure became visible from miles away, growing into a symbol of royal power and human achievement. Eventually, the construction reached its final stage. The outer casing stones were placed carefully along the sides of the pyramid, creating the smooth, shining surface that ancient Egyptians admired. The final capstone was prepared and lifted to the very top of the pyramid. This pyramidion symbolized the connection between the pharaoh and the sun god, completing the monument's sacred design. With the pyramid finished, workers began preparations for the most important event of all, the burial of the pharaoh. The funeral ceremony was one of the most elaborate rituals in ancient Egypt. Priests, officials, and members of the royal family gathered to perform sacred rites designed to guide the pharaoh's spirit safely into the afterlife. The mummified body of the pharaoh was placed inside a richly decorated coffin and carried into the pyramid's burial chamber. Treasure, statues, jewelry, and ceremonial objects were placed around the tomb to accompany the king into the next world. Once the burial was complete, workers sealed the inner passages using heavy stone blocks. The pyramid was then closed forever. At least, that was the plan. But over the centuries, curious explorers, treasure hunters, and archaeologists would try to uncover the secrets hidden inside these incredible monuments. What they discovered would reveal even more fascinating details about the pyramids and the civilization that built them. Those discoveries appear in the next part of the story.
Start Part 7. For centuries after the pyramids were completed, they stood silently on the edge of the desert, watching civilizations rise and fall around them. Winds carried sand across the Giza plateau, slowly burying parts of the monuments. Kingdoms changed, rulers came and went, but the pyramids remained. To the people who lived long after the age of the pharaohs, the pyramids were already ancient. Travelers, historians, and explorers from distant lands came to Egypt and looked at these enormous stone structures with amazement. They asked the same question people still ask today. How were these incredible monuments built? One of the earliest writers to describe the pyramids was the Greek historian Herodotus. He visited Egypt around 450 BCE, more than 2,000 years after the pyramids were constructed. Herodotus spoke with Egyptian priests and recorded stories about the pyramids and the pharaohs who built them. According to the accounts he heard, it took about 20 years to build the Great Pyramid and required tens of thousands of workers. While some details in his writings may have been exaggerated or misunderstood, his work helped spread the fame of the pyramids throughout the ancient world. As time passed, however, the original purpose of many pyramids was forgotten. Sandstorms covered temples and structures around them. Some passages became blocked, and the outer casing stones slowly disappeared as later builders reused them for other construction projects. By the Middle Ages, many pyramids were partially buried in sand, and their interiors were hidden from view. Yet the mystery of what lay inside them continued to attract attention. Treasure hunters believed the pyramids contained vast riches left behind by the ancient pharaohs. Stories of hidden gold and magical artifacts spread through the region, encouraging many people to search for secret entrances. Some explorers used tools to break through blocked corridors or sealed passages. Others tried digging tunnels into the structures. Unfortunately, many pyramids were looted long before modern historians had the chance to study them carefully. Ancient tomb robbers had already discovered ways to enter the burial chambers, often removing valuable treasures within a few generations after the pharaoh's burial. Despite these losses, the pyramids still contained valuable clues about ancient Egyptian civilization. In the 1800s and early 1900s, modern archaeology began to study the pyramids more scientifically. Instead of searching for treasure, archaeologists wanted to understand how the pyramids were built and what they revealed about ancient society. Careful excavations around the Giza plateau uncovered temples, storage areas, and the remains of the workers' village that had supported the construction project. These discoveries helped historians piece together the story of pyramid building. One of the most fascinating discoveries involved the internal structure of the Great Pyramid. For centuries, people believed the pyramid contained many hidden chambers filled with treasures.
In reality, the interior of the Great Pyramid is surprisingly simple compared to later Egyptian tombs. Inside the structure are several main passages and chambers. The descending passage leads downward from the entrance into the bedrock beneath the pyramid. This corridor connects to an unfinished underground chamber that may have been part of an early design plan. Another passage, known as the ascending passage, leads upward toward the heart of the pyramid. This passage eventually opens into the Grand Gallery, one of the most impressive architectural spaces within the structure. The Grand Gallery is a tall, narrow corridor with a high ceiling that rises in stepped layers along its sides. The design of the Grand Gallery may have helped workers move large stone blocks during construction. It also leads toward the most important room inside the pyramid. This room is known as the King's Chamber. The King's Chamber is built entirely from massive granite blocks. At its center sits a large stone sarcophagus, which once held the body of Pharaoh Khufu. The chamber itself is surprisingly plain, without elaborate carvings or decorations on its walls. Above the King's Chamber are several small rooms known as relieving chambers. These spaces were built to distribute the enormous weight of the pyramid above the chamber and prevent the ceiling from collapsing. The builders placed huge granite beams across these chambers, carefully arranging them to redirect the pressure of the stone above. This clever design shows how well the ancient engineers understood the challenges of constructing such a massive structure. Another intriguing feature of the Great Pyramid is the pair of narrow shafts that extend from the King's Chamber toward the outer surface of the pyramid. These shafts are only about 8 inches wide, too small for a person to pass through. For many years, historians believed they were ventilation shafts meant to provide fresh air inside the chamber. However, modern research suggests they may have had a symbolic purpose instead. Some scholars believe the shafts were aligned with important stars in the ancient Egyptian sky. According to Egyptian religious beliefs, the pharaoh's spirit could travel through these symbolic pathways to join the gods among the stars. This idea reflects how deeply religion influenced pyramid design. The pyramids were not just tombs, they were spiritual gateways meant to guide the pharaoh into the afterlife. As archaeologists continued exploring the Giza Plateau, they made another important discovery. Near the Great Pyramid, they found large pits carved into the bedrock. Inside one of these pits was a carefully disassembled wooden ship. This vessel, known today as a solar boat, had been buried beside the pyramid thousands of years ago. After careful reconstruction, archaeologists realized it was a beautifully crafted boat over 140 feet long. The solar boat was likely intended to carry the pharaoh's spirit across the heavens alongside the sun god during his journey through the afterlife. This discovery provided another glimpse into the religious beliefs surrounding pyramid construction. Over time, new technologies allowed researchers to study the pyramids in ways earlier explorers could not imagine. Modern scanning tools, radar imaging, and other advanced techniques have revealed hidden spaces and structural details inside the pyramids without damaging the ancient stone. These discoveries continue to deepen our understanding of how the pyramids were built. Yet even with all this research, the pyramids still hold many secrets. How did the ancient builders achieve such incredible precision with simple tools? What additional chambers or hidden spaces might still exist inside the structures? And what can the pyramids teach us about the civilization that created them? The answers to those questions appear in the next part of the story.
As modern researchers continued studying the pyramids, one fact became increasingly clear. These ancient monuments were far more sophisticated than earlier generations of historians had believed. What once seemed like simple stone structures built by brute force were actually the result of careful planning, advanced knowledge, and remarkable engineering skill. One of the most fascinating aspects of pyramid construction is the incredible precision with which the stones were cut and placed. The Great Pyramid alone contains an estimated 2.3 million stone blocks. Each block had to be shaped so that it fit securely with the stones around it. Many of the joints between blocks are so tight that even today it is difficult to slide a thin blade between them. This precision is especially impressive considering the tools available to ancient Egyptian builders. Their primary cutting tools were made from copper, a relatively soft metal compared to modern steel. They also used stone hammers made from hard rock, such as dolerite. To cut limestone blocks, workers struck the stone repeatedly with these tools, gradually shaping it into the required form. For harder materials like granite, the process was even more demanding. Granite blocks were often shaped using pounding stones. Workers repeatedly struck the granite with heavy dolerite balls, slowly wearing the surface down until the desired shape was achieved. The process required patience and great skill. Transporting these massive stones presented another enormous challenge. Most of the limestone used for the pyramid cores came from quarries located close to the construction sites. Workers could cut the stones and move them relatively short distances. However, some materials had to travel much farther. The granite used for the internal chambers of the Great Pyramid came from quarries near Aswan in southern Egypt. This location is more than 500 miles away from Giza. Moving granite blocks over such a distance required careful coordination. The Nile River served as the main transportation highway of ancient Egypt. Workers loaded the stones onto large wooden boats designed to carry heavy cargo. These boats traveled north along the river, carried by the current and guided by crews of skilled sailors. When the boats reached the area near Giza, canals and temporary waterways allowed them to move closer to the construction sites. Archaeologists have discovered remains of ancient harbors and docking areas that were used during pyramid construction. These ports allowed ships carrying stone blocks to unload their cargo efficiently. From the harbor, workers dragged the stones across land on wooden sleds. Teams of laborers pulled the sleds using thick ropes while others prepared the ground ahead. An important discovery made by researchers involved ancient drawings showing workers pouring water onto the sand in front of the sleds. This simple action reduced friction and made it easier to move the heavy loads. Modern experiments have confirmed that slightly wet sand can reduce the force needed to pull heavy objects across it. This clever technique allowed workers to transport stones that weighed several tons each. As construction continued, the pyramid gradually rose higher and higher. Engineers had to ensure that the structure remained stable and symmetrical as new layers were added. To achieve this, surveyors constantly measured the pyramid's sides and angles. They used plumb lines, measuring ropes, and leveling tools to maintain accuracy. Each layer of stones had to be placed carefully so that the pyramid maintained its precise shape. One of the most remarkable features of the Great Pyramid is how closely its sides align with the four cardinal directions. Modern measurements show that the pyramid's alignment is incredibly accurate. Its sides face almost perfectly north, south, east, and west. This precision suggests that Egyptian builders had a deep understanding of astronomy. By observing the stars at night, they could determine the exact direction of true north. Using simple sighting tools, they aligned the pyramid's base with the movements of the heavens. For the ancient Egyptians, this alignment had symbolic meaning. The pharaoh was believed to be connected to the gods and the cosmos. By aligning the pyramid with the stars and the cardinal directions, the builders created a monument that reflected the order of the universe. Another fascinating detail about the pyramids involves their original appearance. Today, the pyramids look weathered and rough, with large blocks forming their outer surfaces. But when they were first completed, they looked very different. The pyramids were covered with smooth white limestone casing stones that had been polished to a bright finish. These stones reflected sunlight so strongly that the pyramids appeared to glow in the desert landscape.
Travelers approaching Egypt by boat along the Nile would have seen the shining pyramids rising above the horizon long before reaching the city. At the very top of each pyramid was a special capstone known as a pyramidion. The pyramidion was often covered with gold or a gold-colored metal called electrum. When sunlight struck the capstone, it created a brilliant flash of light visible from distant reaches. This shining peak symbolized the connection between the pharaoh and the sun god. However, over time, many of these original casing stones were removed and reused in other building projects. Earthquakes and natural erosion also damaged parts of the pyramids. As a result, the pyramids gradually lost their smooth outer layers, revealing the rough stone core underneath. Even without their original casing stones, the pyramids remain among the most impressive structures ever built. Modern researchers have used advanced technology to study the pyramids in new ways. Infrared scanning, ground-penetrating radar, and other imaging techniques have allowed scientists to look inside the pyramids without damaging them. In recent years, researchers discovered a large hidden space inside the Great Pyramid using cosmic ray scanning technology. This mysterious void lies above the Grand Gallery and may represent a previously unknown chamber. Although its exact purpose remains uncertain, the discovery shows that the pyramids may still hold secrets waiting to be uncovered. Every new discovery adds another piece to the puzzle of how these incredible monuments were built. But the pyramids are not just important because of their engineering. They also reveal much about the beliefs, culture, and organization of ancient Egyptian society. Why were the pyramids shaped the way they were? What religious meaning did their design hold? And how did pyramid construction influence the rest of Egyptian civilization? Those answers appear in the next part of the story.
Start Part 9. To truly understand the pyramids, it is important to look beyond their massive stones and impressive engineering. The pyramids were not built simply as monuments of power. Their design was deeply connected to the religious beliefs of ancient Egypt and the way Egyptians understood the universe. For the ancient Egyptians, the world was filled with powerful gods who controlled nature, life, and death. Among these gods, one of the most important was the sun god, known as Ra. Each day, the sun rose in the east, traveled across the sky, and set in the west. Egyptians believed this daily journey represented the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. The pharaoh, as the ruler of Egypt, was believed to be closely connected to the gods. During life, he acted as the divine leader who maintained order and balance in the kingdom. After death, his spirit was expected to join the gods in the heavens. Because of this belief, the pharaoh's tomb needed to be more than just a burial place. It had to serve as a gateway between the earthly world and the divine world. The shape of the pyramid played a key role in this idea. Some historians believe the pyramid shape symbolized the rays of the sun spreading down toward the earth. The sloping sides may have represented a pathway that allowed the pharaoh's spirit to climb toward the sky and join the sun god. Another theory connects the pyramid shape to a sacred stone called the benben. According to ancient Egyptian creation stories, the world began when a mound of land rose from the waters of chaos. This mound was known as the benben, and it was believed to be the place where the first rays of the sun touched the earth. The pyramid may have symbolized this sacred mound, representing creation, rebirth, and the eternal cycle of life. The pyramidion, placed at the top of each pyramid, also carried strong symbolic meaning. Covered in gold or electrum, it reflected sunlight and represented the shining presence of the sun god. Together, the pyramid's shape and its shining peak created a powerful spiritual image. But the pyramid itself was only one part of a much larger religious complex. Each pyramid was connected to several temples and ceremonial structures that played important roles in the burial rituals of the pharaoh. At the edge of the Nile floodplain stood the Valley Temple. This temple served as the place where the pharaoh's body was prepared for burial. Priests performed sacred rituals here, including the final stages of mummification.
From the Valley Temple, a long covered walkway called a causeway led upward toward the pyramid. The causeway was often decorated with carvings and paintings showing scenes from the pharaoh's life, religious ceremonies, and offerings to the gods. At the end of the causeway stood the mortuary temple, located next to the pyramid itself. This temple was where priests performed daily rituals honoring the dead king. Offerings of food, incense, and prayers were regularly presented to ensure the pharaoh's spirit remained strong in the afterlife. These rituals were believed to help maintain balance in the universe. As long as the pharaoh's spirit was properly honored, the gods would continue to protect Egypt and allow the kingdom to prosper. Inside the pyramid, the burial chamber held the pharaoh's sarcophagus, along with treasures and objects needed for the afterlife. Egyptians believed that the soul had several parts. One of these was the Ka, a spiritual double of the person that continued to exist after death. The Ka required food and offerings, which is why temples near the pyramids continued to operate long after the pharaoh was buried. Another part of the soul, known as the Ba, was believed to travel between the world of the living and the world of the gods. Because of these beliefs, preserving the pharaoh's body was extremely important. This led to the development of mummification, a complex process designed to protect the body from decay. The mummification process could take several weeks. Priests carefully removed internal organs, treated the body with special oils and salts, and wrapped it in layers of linen cloth. Amulets and protective charms were often placed within the wrappings to guard the pharaoh during his journey into the afterlife. Once the body was prepared, it was placed inside a decorated coffin and carried through the temples toward the pyramid. The funeral ceremony involved many rituals meant to restore the pharaoh's senses in the afterlife. One of the most important rituals was called the opening of the mouth ceremony. During this ritual, priests touched special tools to the mummy's mouth, eyes, and ears. This symbolic act was believed to allow the pharaoh to breathe, see, hear, and speak again in the next world. After the ceremony, the coffin was placed inside the burial chamber along with valuable objects such as jewelry, statues, furniture, and ceremonial weapons. These items were meant to serve the pharaoh in the afterlife, ensuring that he would live comfortably in the world beyond death. Once the burial was complete, the inner corridors of the pyramid were sealed using heavy stone blocks. Workers closed the entrances carefully, hoping to protect the tomb from robbers. The outer temples continued operating for many years after the burial. Priests visited the mortuary temple daily to perform rituals and maintain the spiritual connection between the pharaoh and the gods. Over time, however, these traditions gradually changed. Later Egyptian rulers began building smaller pyramids or choosing different types of tombs altogether. Economic pressures, political changes, and the increasing problem of tomb robbing led to new burial practices. Eventually, many pharaohs chose hidden tombs carved deep into cliffs rather than large pyramids visible across the desert. But even as burial traditions evolved, the pyramids remained powerful symbols of Egypt's ancient past. Travelers who visited the pyramids centuries later could not help but feel amazed by their size and mystery. Yet one question continued to puzzle historians and archaeologists. How did ancient Egyptian builders organize such massive construction projects without modern machines, computers, or advanced tools? The answer reveals one of the most impressive aspects of pyramid construction. That story continues in the next part.
Start Part 10. Behind the massive stones of the pyramids stood something just as impressive as the engineering itself, a powerful and highly organized system of administration. Building a pyramid was not simply a matter of moving stones and stacking them together. It required planning on a national scale, involving thousands of workers, huge supplies of food, and careful management of resources across the entire kingdom of Egypt. The pharaoh stood at the top of this system.
As the ruler of Egypt, the pharaoh controlled the land, the workforce, and the wealth of the kingdom. But even a powerful ruler could not manage a project as enormous as pyramid construction alone. To organize such work, the Egyptians developed a structured government with officials responsible for different tasks. One of the most important figures in this system was the vizier. The vizier acted as the chief advisor and administrator for the pharaoh. He supervised government activities, including major construction projects like the pyramids. Under the vizier were many other officials who managed specific responsibilities. Some oversaw quarry operations where stones were cut. Others supervised transportation along the Nile River. Still others managed labor teams working directly at the pyramid site. Scribes were also essential to the system. In ancient Egypt, scribes were highly educated individuals trained to read and write hieroglyphs and other forms of Egyptian writing. Their job was to keep records of supplies, labor schedules, and deliveries of materials. At pyramid construction sites, scribes carefully recorded how many workers were present each day, how much food was distributed, and how many stones were transported. Without these records, managing such a huge workforce would have been impossible. Food was one of the most important resources needed for pyramid construction. Thousands of workers needed to be fed every day, sometimes for decades. Large farms across Egypt supplied grain that was turned into bread. Herds of cattle, sheep, and goats provided meat. Fishermen caught fish from the Nile, while farmers grew vegetables such as onions and garlic. These foods were transported to the workers' villages near the pyramid sites. There, large kitchens and bakeries prepared meals for the laborers. Beer was also produced in large quantities. In ancient Egypt, beer was considered a basic part of the daily diet. It provided energy and was often safer to drink than untreated water. Managing all these supplies required careful organization. Storage buildings near the pyramids held grain, dried fish, and other foods. Officials kept track of how much food was available and ensured that deliveries arrived regularly. Transportation was another major challenge. Stone blocks had to be moved from quarries to the pyramid construction sites. In many cases, this involved transporting heavy materials across long distances. The Nile River played a crucial role in this process. Boats carried stone blocks and supplies along the river, connecting distant regions of Egypt to the construction sites at Giza and other pyramid locations. Archaeologists have discovered ancient docks and harbor structures that were used during pyramid construction. These harbors allowed ships to unload heavy cargo close to the building sites. From the harbor, workers used sleds to drag stones across prepared roads toward the pyramids. To maintain efficiency, workers were organized into rotating teams. Each team worked for a set period before being replaced by another group. This rotation allowed the project to continue steadily without exhausting the labor force. Many workers were farmers who joined the construction effort during the Nile flood season. Since their farmland was underwater during this time, they were available to work on state projects like pyramid building. This system allowed Egypt to use its workforce efficiently while still maintaining agricultural production. Skilled craftsmen formed another important group within the workforce. Stone masons carefully shaped the blocks used in the pyramids. Carpenters built sleds, ramps, and tools. Metal workers created copper chisels and other equipment used by stonecutters. Architects and engineers planned the structure of the pyramids and supervised construction. They ensured that measurements remained accurate and that the pyramid's shape stayed symmetrical. At every stage of construction, overseers monitored the progress of the work. They inspected the placement of stones, checked the condition of ramps, and ensured that workers followed instructions. Their role was essential in maintaining quality and safety on the construction site. Communication between different teams was also important. Messengers carried instructions from officials to workers across the construction site. Signals and shouted commands helped coordinate large groups during tasks such as pulling heavy stone sleds. Despite the scale of the project, the system worked remarkably well. Over the years, the pyramid slowly rose higher, stone by stone, until it reached its final height. The successful completion of these projects demonstrated the strength of Egypt's government and the unity of its people. Few civilizations in ancient history were capable of organizing projects on such a massive scale. Yet even with this impressive system, pyramid construction eventually began to change. Later rulers faced different economic conditions and political challenges. Maintaining the enormous workforce needed for giant pyramids became increasingly difficult. At the same time, tomb robbers continued to threaten royal burials. Because pyramids were so large and visible, they made easy targets for thieves searching for treasure. As a result, later pharaohs began searching for new ways to protect their tombs and ensure their safety in the afterlife. This shift would eventually lead to a completely different style of royal burial. Instead of building enormous pyramids rising above the desert, future kings would hide their tombs deep within remote valleys and cliffs. The most famous of these burial places would later become known as the Valley of the Kings. But before the age of hidden tombs began, the pyramids had already left an unforgettable mark on history. Their construction had demonstrated the extraordinary capabilities of ancient Egyptian civilization. Yet the pyramids themselves would continue to reveal new secrets long after the age of the pharaohs had ended. Those discoveries appear in the next part of the story.
Start Part 11, Rocky. Even after the age of the pharaohs had passed, the pyramids continued to reveal astonishing secrets about ancient Egyptian society, engineering, and beliefs. Over centuries, historians, explorers, and archaeologists uncovered new evidence that shed light on how these incredible monuments were built and why they held such importance for Egyptian culture. One of the most significant discoveries came from careful study of the workers' villages near the pyramids. Excavations revealed that thousands of laborers lived in well-organized communities with streets, housing blocks, workshops, and storage areas. This finding challenged earlier assumptions that the pyramids were built by slaves. Instead, it became clear that the workforce consisted largely of paid, skilled laborers who lived in proper accommodations. Their homes were built from mud brick, sturdy, and arranged in a planned layout. Remains of ovens, bread molds, and large storage jars showed how thousands of meals were prepared daily to sustain the massive workforce. Archaeologists also found evidence of health care for the workers. Skeletons showed signs of healed injuries, indicating that medical care and rest were provided. This suggested that the workers were respected and their well-being was crucial to the success of these monumental projects. Another remarkable discovery involved ancient tools and construction techniques. Researchers found copper chisels, wooden sleds, ropes, and stone hammers. Experiments with these tools demonstrated that the Egyptians could cut and move massive stones using simple yet ingenious methods. For example, workers discovered that dragging stones over sand was easier when the sand was slightly wet. This simple technique reduced friction, making it possible for teams of men to move blocks weighing several tons with coordinated effort. Large ramps, possibly straight, zigzag, or spiral, were used to transport stones to the higher levels of the pyramids. Equally astonishing were findings related to the precision of the pyramid's construction. Measurements of the Great Pyramid revealed that its sides align almost perfectly with the cardinal directions. The base is incredibly level, with deviations of only a few centimeters over hundreds of feet. This precision demonstrated not just skill, but an advanced understanding of mathematics and surveying. Inside the pyramids, discoveries such as the Grand Gallery, the King's Chamber, and the hidden relieving chambers revealed an exceptional understanding of structural engineering. The relieving chambers above the King's Chamber redirected the enormous weight of the pyramid, preventing collapse over thousands of years. Narrow shafts in the King's Chamber, aligned with specific stars, demonstrated a deep connection between architecture, astronomy, and religious belief. In 1954, archaeologists unearthed the famous solar boat near the Great Pyramid.
This massive vessel, over 140 feet long, had been buried alongside the pharaoh and reconstructed in modern times. It symbolized the journey of the pharaoh's spirit across the heavens, reflecting the Egyptians' intricate religious beliefs. Even the discovery of pyramid inscriptions and graffiti left by workers revealed their organization and pride. Groups left markings such as the Friends of Khufu and the Drunkards of Menkaure, showing that laborers identified with their teams and perhaps even enjoyed camaraderie and a sense of accomplishment. Modern technology has continued to uncover new secrets. Using cosmic ray scanning, ground-penetrating radar, and other imaging tools, researchers have found previously unknown voids in chambers inside the Great Pyramid. These discoveries suggest that there may still be parts of the pyramid's interior that remain unexplored, waiting to teach us more about ancient construction techniques. Together, these findings show that the pyramids were not just tombs or monuments. They were reflections of an entire civilization's knowledge, organization, and spirituality. They required careful coordination across many fields: architecture, engineering, astronomy, agriculture, logistics, and religious practice. The pyramids also provide insight into the values of ancient Egyptian society. The emphasis on precision, permanence, and alignment with the cosmos reveals a culture that sought harmony, stability, and connection with the divine. Building a pyramid was an act that combined technical skill with profound religious and cultural significance. Yet, despite all these discoveries, mysteries remain. How exactly the Egyptians managed to lift the heaviest granite blocks to the upper chambers is still debated. The purpose of some internal voids and hidden spaces remains uncertain, and the sheer scale of effort required for these projects continues to amaze modern engineers and historians alike. The pyramids, in their grandeur, precision, and symbolism, remain timeless testaments to human ingenuity and determination. The next part explores the lasting influence of the pyramids on later civilizations and how their design inspired architects and builders for thousands of years.
Start Part 12. Rocket. Even after the secrets of construction and the lives of workers were better understood, the pyramids' influence extended far beyond ancient Egypt. Their scale, precision, and symbolism inspired countless generations, shaping architecture, culture, and engineering across the world. In the centuries following their construction, travelers from Greece, Rome, and later Europe marveled at the pyramids. Ancient Greek historians like Herodotus and Diodorus Siculus documented their awe, often exaggerating numbers of laborers or claiming impossible feats. Despite embellishments, their accounts spread knowledge of the pyramids across the Mediterranean, making Egypt a center of fascination. Roman architects studied the pyramids as examples of monumental engineering. While Rome never attempted to replicate their exact design, the focus on precision, structural stability, and careful alignment influenced large-scale constructions such as amphitheaters, aqueducts, and temples. The pyramids also left a mark on later Egyptian civilization. Pharaohs of later dynasties continued to build pyramids, although on a smaller scale. The shift from visible monumental tombs to hidden rock-cut tombs, such as those in the Valley of the Kings, reflected lessons learned from both practical challenges and the threat of tomb robbers. Even in these new forms, the symbolic concepts of alignment with the cosmos and connection to the divine persisted. During the Middle Ages, the pyramids remained a source of fascination for travelers and scholars. Arab historians like al-Makrizi described the pyramids and recorded their dimensions. European explorers and merchants, visiting Egypt on trade missions, encountered these structures and carried back stories that would fuel Renaissance curiosity about ancient civilizations. By the 18th and 19th centuries, Egypt became a focus of scientific study. Archaeologists began systematic surveys, recording measurements, examining construction techniques, and uncovering nearby temples and worker settlements. Discoveries such as the solar boats, hidden chambers, and detailed worker graffiti shed light on the highly organized society that built the pyramids. Modern engineering also took inspiration from the pyramids. Architects and builders studied their stability, load distribution, and alignment to improve large-scale structures in contemporary times. The pyramids demonstrated that human labor, organization, and simple tools, when combined with planning and ingenuity, could create structures that endure for millennia. Culturally, the pyramids became symbols of human achievement. They represented ambition, vision, and the intersection of human skill with spiritual purpose. Poets, artists, and filmmakers of later centuries drew inspiration from their enormity and mystery, portraying them as eternal monuments of human aspiration. Even today, the pyramids continue to teach lessons about problem-solving, teamwork, and the power of long-term planning. Modern research continues to uncover new information, from undiscovered internal voids to astronomical alignments, showing that the pyramids still hold secrets that challenge our understanding of the ancient world. Ultimately, the pyramids of Giza endure as both practical marvels and symbols. They are a testament to a civilization that combined engineering genius, religious devotion, and societal organization to create structures that have inspired awe for over 4,000 years. The next part explores the personal stories of those who lived and worked during the construction of the pyramids, revealing their daily lives, challenges, and triumphs. Start Part 13. While much of the story of the pyramids focuses on pharaohs, monuments, and engineering, the human element, the lives of the workers who built these enormous structures, is equally fascinating. Archaeological discoveries have revealed that these were not faceless masses of laborers, but individuals with families, skills, routines, and pride in their work. The workers' village near Giza provides a window into their daily lives. Housing was constructed in organized blocks, with small rooms that likely accommodated families or groups of laborers. Mud bricks formed sturdy walls, and streets were laid out to allow easy movement of people and supplies. Workshops and tool-making areas were built nearby so that craftsmen could repair or create the necessary equipment without leaving the village. Food was central to daily life. Thousands of workers had to be fed, and large-scale kitchens baked bread, prepared fish, vegetables, and meat, and brewed beer. Bread was the staple of the diet, often paired with onions or garlic. Beer was not only a staple drink, but also an important source of calories and nutrition, particularly for those performing heavy physical labor. Medical care was surprisingly advanced. Skeletal remains show that injuries from quarry work, sled dragging, or construction were treated carefully, and injured workers were allowed to recover before returning to labor. This level of care underscores that the workforce was valued, and their health directly affected the success of pyramid construction. The social structure within the workforce was highly organized. Laborers were divided into teams or gangs, each with its own supervisors. Some teams had humorous or proud names, such as the Drunkards of Menkaure or Friends of Khufu, showing camaraderie and pride. Teams rotated in shifts, allowing work to continue steadily without exhausting the laborers. Skilled craftsmen held essential roles. Stonemasons shaped blocks with precision, ensuring that each piece fit perfectly with surrounding stones. Carpenters maintained sleds and ramps, while metal workers forged copper tools. Surveyors and architects guided the layout, making sure that measurements remained accurate as the pyramid rose higher. Daily routines were physically demanding. Workers began early to avoid the desert heat, traveled to quarries or the pyramid site, and spent hours lifting, dragging, cutting, and placing stones. Despite this, there was structure and order. Meals were scheduled, supplies were distributed, and overseers coordinated work across the site. Life at the construction site also included social elements. Workers ate together, shared living spaces, and likely celebrated milestones or religious events. Graffiti left behind shows humor, pride, and group identity, suggesting that the workforce was not only skilled, but also engaged with their work in meaningful ways. During the final stages of pyramid construction, the most delicate tasks fell to skilled artisans. Placing the smooth outer casing stones required extreme precision, while finishing the burial chamber and installing the pharaoh sarcophagus demanded careful planning and coordination. These moments highlighted the collaboration between ordinary workers and highly trained craftsmen.
The construction process often spanned decades, so some workers spent their entire careers on a single pyramid. Generations could live and work on the same monument, passing down knowledge, skills, and techniques to newcomers. This continuity ensured high standards and allowed complex engineering solutions to be executed successfully. Through these human stories, it becomes clear that the pyramids were not merely the vision of a pharaoh, but a collective achievement. The organization, care, and skill of thousands of workers made the monumental structures possible. Their labor, discipline, and ingenuity ensured that the pyramids would endure for millennia. The final part explores the legacy of the pyramids, how they shaped the world's understanding of human potential, engineering, and culture, and why they continue to captivate imaginations today.
Start Part 14. The story of the pyramids reaches its grand conclusion not with their construction, but with their enduring legacy. After thousands of years, these monuments continue to inspire awe, study, and imagination, reminding us of the extraordinary capabilities of human civilization. The pyramids of Giza have shaped how the world views ancient Egypt. They are not merely tombs. They are symbols of innovation, organization, and belief. By combining advanced engineering, precise mathematics, and a spiritual vision, the Egyptians created structures that remain some of the most remarkable in human history. Their influence extended far beyond their time. Later civilizations studied their design and construction. Roman architects marveled at their stability, while Renaissance scholars and engineers drew inspiration from their scale and precision. Even today, architects, engineers, and scientists examine the pyramids to learn lessons about load distribution, long-term durability, and project management on a massive scale. Culturally, the pyramids have become universal symbols of ambition and human achievement. Artists, writers, filmmakers, and historians continue to portray them as the ultimate expression of ingenuity and perseverance. Their image evokes mystery, power, and the deep connection between humanity and the cosmos. The pyramids also highlight the power of collaboration. Tens of thousands of workers, craftsmen, engineers, and administrators combine their skills and labor over decades to achieve a single vision. This scale of coordination without modern technology demonstrates what organized societies can accomplish when knowledge, planning, and effort are united. Modern archaeology continues to reveal secrets. Advanced imaging technology has uncovered hidden voids, unknown chambers, and subtle design features that even ancient builders may have considered sacred or functional. These discoveries remind us that the pyramids are not static monuments. They are living records of human creativity, waiting for new generations to study and appreciate. Beyond their technical achievements, the pyramids offer insight into the values and beliefs of the civilization that built them. They reflect a society that prized order, harmony, and a connection to the divine. Each stone, each alignment, and each chamber was carefully planned to serve spiritual, political, and practical purposes. Even in the present day, millions of visitors journey to the Giza Plateau to witness the pyramids firsthand. Standing before the Great Pyramid, one can feel the immense scale of the accomplishment and imagine the lives of the people who labored to build it. The monument continues to bridge time, connecting modern humans with the ingenuity, faith, and determination of those who lived thousands of years ago. Ultimately, the pyramids are more than structures. They are enduring symbols of what humanity can achieve. They remind us that vision, collaboration, and dedication can create works that transcend generations. From the daily lives of the workers to the spiritual aspirations of the pharaohs, from the precision of each stone to alignment with the stars, the pyramids embody the extraordinary story of human ambition and civilization. And so, the pyramids continue to stand, timeless, inspiring, and eternal, offering insight, wonder, and a connection to one of history's greatest achievements. This completes the 14-part series on how the ancient Egyptians built the pyramids.